I don't know why her words keep circling in my head. It's over. She didn't say them to me that night. They weren't meant for me at all. But when I heard them, slipping out of her mouth like the last breath of a secret, I couldn't forget. And somehow, without thinking, I whispered under my breath, "Then let me start again." No one heard me. Not even her. That was a week ago, in the quiet corner of the bookstore where I work part-time. I was shelving returns, dust sticking to my fingers, when she walked in. She didn't belong in the fluorescent light and cracked linoleum floors of this place. She had that kind of presence, the kind that makes you straighten your posture before you even realize you're doing it. Mid-40s, tall, with dark hair pinned loosely at the back of her neck. A fitted jacket that looked too expensive for our neighborhood. Not flashy, just composed. She carried herself like someone who'd survived too many unfinished conversations. I noticed her before I even knew I had. Noticed the way she moved slowly through the aisles, fingertips grazing spines, without pulling a single book free. She didn't read the titles. She just touched them. "Can I help you find something?" My voice cracked slightly, and I hated myself for it. She glanced over her shoulder. Not the kind of look that welcomes interruption. More like one that measures you and decides what you're worth in less than a second. I braced myself for dismissal. Instead, she smiled. Small, polite, but it reached her eyes. "I'm fine," she said. Her voice was steady, but quiet enough I almost had to lean in. I nodded and retreated, pretending to rearrange the cookbooks that no one ever buys. That should have been the end of it. But she stayed. Minutes passed. She stood in the poetry section, holding a book loosely, like she didn't intend to buy it, just needed the weight of it in her hands. I tried not to stare, failed, and then tried harder. When she finally stepped toward the counter, I was wiping down the register like it was the most important job in the world. She placed the book in front of me. Yeats' Selected Poems. Her nails were bare, short, practical. I wondered if she chewed them when no one was looking. "You read him?" she asked. It took me a second to realize she meant me. "Yeats? Yeah, a little," I lied. Her eyebrows lifted, amused. Not mocking, but sharper than I was ready for. "Which poem?" I froze. My throat went dry. The silence stretched too long, but she didn't fill it for me. Finally, I mumbled, "The one about, the cloths of heaven." Her smile returned, softer this time. Dangerous choice. I don't know why that hit me the way it did. Maybe because it sounded like she wasn't talking about poetry anymore. She didn't buy the book, just left it on the counter, shook her head almost imperceptibly, and walked out the door. The bell above it jingled too cheerfully in her wake. I stood there, fingers still resting on the worn cover she'd touched, replaying her smile in my mind. The air felt heavier, like the room had changed shape just because she'd been in it. That was the moment. Not love. Not even attraction in the way people mean when they say it. Just a spark of something unspoken. And the worst part is, I haven't stopped thinking about it since. Not the next day. Not even the one after. A full week passed before the bell above the door jingled, and there she was again, as if she'd been carved out of memory and set loose in the flesh. I was behind the counter pretending to organize receipts. When I looked up, she was standing by the classic shelf, coat still on, hair damp at the ends like she'd just stepped out of the rain. For a moment, I thought she might leave again without saying a word. But then, she spoke. "Do you carry repair manuals?" "Old ones. For typewriters." Her voice was low, measured. Not embarrassed exactly, but the kind of tone people use when they don't want to be overheard. I nodded too quickly. "Yeah, I think we have a couple in the back. I'll check." She followed me. Not too close, not too far, as I led her into the narrow storeroom. It smelled of dust and cardboard, light flickering in the corner where the bulb never fully committed to working. I crouched, pulling at a stack until a thin paperback slid free, the Smith Corona Guide to Repair. "Lucky," I said, holding it out. Her hand brushed mine when she took it. Only for a second. Her fingers were cool, steady, but I noticed the faint tremor as she gripped the cover. "Thank you," she murmured, then hesitated. "It's not for me. My father's. He left it behind." She stopped there, as if she'd already said too much. I wanted to ask more, but the way her eyes darted to the floor, the way her shoulders tightened, told me not to. So instead, I pointed at the faded illustration on the cover. Looks complicated. That earned me the smallest laugh. The kind that escapes before someone remembers they're supposed to keep it inside. It was quiet, but it filled the room. You've no idea, she said, shaking her head. I watched her thumb trace the edge of the book, not turning the pages, just holding it. Her nails were still short, but I noticed a faint half-moon bruise on one knuckle. She seemed tired in a way makeup or posture couldn't hide. The kind of tired that lives behind the eyes. Do you write? I asked, surprising myself. She looked at me then, really looked, as if measuring whether the question was safe. I used to. A pause. Not anymore. There was weight in those two words. A shutting of a door. The silence stretched, thick with things unsaid. I could hear the buzz of the faulty light, the steady rhythm of my own pulse too loud in my ears. She handed me the book back, not keeping it, just brushing my hand again. Maybe some things aren't meant to be fixed, she said softly. Then she turned and walked out before I could think of what to say. I stood there long after the bell above the door had stilled, the ghost of her laugh still caught in the air. And though she left me nothing, no name, no number, she'd left me that line. Maybe some things aren't meant to be fixed. I can't stop wondering if she was talking about the typewriter. Or herself. It was closing time when the storm rolled in. Rain battered the windows of the shop in waves, hard enough to blur the streetlights outside. I'd just finished stacking the chairs on tables when the bell above the door chimed, and she slipped in, soaked to the shoulders, hair dripping against her cheek. I'm sorry, she said, catching her breath. I didn't realize you were closing. I shook my head too quickly. It's fine. You can wait it out if you want. She hesitated by the door, water pooling beneath her shoes, then finally stepped inside. The shop felt smaller with her in it, the air carrying the faint scent of rain and something floral I couldn't place. I handed her a towel from the back, more worn than clean. She smiled as she took it, pressing it lightly against her hair. You'll ruin your reputation if you keep rescuing strays, she said. I laughed, nervous. I don't think anyone's paying that much attention. For the first time, she didn't argue. She sat at one of the tables, towel draped across her shoulders, and for a while we just listened to the storm together. The shop was dim, only one lamp glowing near the register, and I realized I'd never seen her look less composed. Her mascara had smudged faintly under her eyes. She didn't bother fixing it. You're young, she said suddenly, eyes on the rain-streaked glass. I blinked, unsure how to answer. Is that a problem? Her lips twitched into something that wasn't quite a smile. It's a fact. I wanted to push, to ask why it mattered, but instead I watched her fingers drum lightly against the table. They slowed, stilled. I shouldn't even be here, she whispered, almost to herself. The words tightened my chest. I leaned forward, voice low. Then why are you? Her eyes flicked to mine, sharp, searching, as if she might actually tell me. The moment stretched, an invisible thread pulling us closer. I could almost hear her breathing over the rain. And then her phone buzzed. She pulled it from her coat pocket, the screen lighting her face. Her expression shifted, jaw set, shoulders stiff. She didn't answer, just stared until it stopped. The silence afterward was louder than the storm. It's nothing, she said quickly, tucking the phone away. But her hand lingered near the pocket, knuckles pale. I wanted to ask who it was. I wanted to reach across the table and steady her hand. Instead, I stayed still, nails biting into my palm beneath the wood. Sometimes, she said, voice lower now, the past doesn't take the hint. We were close enough then, close enough that if I'd stood, if I'd taken one step, her shoulder would have brushed mine. The thought alone made my pulse unsteady. I opened my mouth, words gathering in the back of my throat. Something reckless, something I'd regret. But she shifted, pulling the towel tighter, and the distance between us snapped back like a rubber band. The storm raged on, but the moment was gone. Still, I can't forget the look in her eyes when the phone buzzed, like she almost wanted me to stop her from answering. Like she almost wanted me closer. She came in late again, after the rush, but before closing. No storm this time, just the muted quiet of a city holding its breath. I'd just finished sweeping when I looked up and saw her leaning against the shelves, arms crossed like she was holding herself together. She didn't ask for anything, didn't pretend to browse. She just stood there, staring at the row of books as though waiting for them to give her an answer. "You're back," I said softly. Her eyes flicked to me, then away. "Don't sound so surprised." I leaned the broom against the counter. "I wasn't sure I'd see you again." That earned me silence. A long one. She walked slowly toward the register, fingertips grazing the table edge, her movements deliberate. When she finally stopped in front of me, she didn't speak. She just looked. There are glances you can shrug off. This wasn't one of them. "You shouldn't," she began, then cut herself off. I tilted my head. "Shouldn't what?" Her jaw tightened. She exhaled through her nose, shook her head. "This. All of this. What are we doing?" The words landed heavier than I expected. Not angry, not dramatic, just tired, as though she'd been carrying them for longer than I'd been alive. I swallowed. My hands gripped the counter, too tight. "I don't know." My voice was quiet, but it felt truer than anything I'd said in weeks. "I just know I can't ignore it." She blinked, a small flinch, like the honesty had cut closer than she wanted. "You're young," she said again, softer this time. Not a fact. A warning. I almost laughed, but stopped myself. "You keep saying that, like it changes what's happening." Her gaze held mine, sharp and steady, but beneath it I caught something else. Fear, maybe, or regret. She opened her mouth, then closed it, and for a long stretch neither of us said anything. The shop hummed with silence, the kind that makes your heartbeat feel too loud. She finally looked down, pressing her palms against the counter between us. "I've made mistakes before," she whispered. "Ones I don't get to take back." I wanted to ask what she meant, wanted to know everything. But the way her voice broke on that last word stopped me. I stayed quiet. When she looked back up, her eyes were wet, though no tears fell. "You don't understand yet," she said. I forced myself not to reach for her hand, even though it was inches away. The silence stretched again, heavier than touch, more intimate than words. "I don't want to ruin you," she finally whispered. It was devastating, not because it was cruel, but because it was honest. And I realized in that moment, I'd already let her. She didn't come for days after that night. The shop felt hollow without her. Every creak of the floorboards, every customer who walked through the door felt like a false alarm. I kept telling myself it didn't matter, that I'd only known her a handful of weeks. But every time I looked at the poetry shelf, I could still see her standing there, hands wrapped around a book she never bought. Then, just as I'd started to believe she wouldn't return, she appeared again. Not polished this time. No jacket, no careful hair. Just a simple sweater, worn at the cuffs, and an expression that made her look younger and older all at once. "I shouldn't be here," she said as soon as the door shut behind her. "You said that before," I answered. My voice sounded steadier than I felt. She didn't smile. Instead, she held out an envelope. "I found this yesterday. I shouldn't be giving it to you," but her words trailed off. I took it carefully. The paper was yellowed, the edges soft. Inside was a photograph, grainy, slightly faded. A man in his 20s, standing in front of an old typewriter. He had the same restless eyes I see in the mirror some mornings. "He looks like me," I said before I could stop myself. She nodded once. Her lips pressed together like she'd been holding something back for years. "My brother. He died when he was 23. The words landed like a stone in my chest. Suddenly her guardedness, her silences, her searching glances all made sense in a way I wished they didn't. "I remind you of him," I whispered. Her shoulders tightened, but she didn't look away. "It isn't fair to you," she said. "But yes, sometimes when you speak, or when you look at me too long, I forget myself. And then I remember, and it feels," she exhaled sharply, shaking her head. "It feels like I'm betraying him. Or you. Or both." I didn't know what to say. The photograph trembled slightly in my hand. He had my build, my awkward grin, even the faint stubborn tilt in the chin. A stranger I'd never met, and yet suddenly I was living in his shadow. "I'm not him," I said finally. It sounded too fragile, like the words would crack if she pressed against them. "I know." Her eyes softened, but not in relief. More like sorrow. "But it doesn't stop me from seeing him in you." The shop was quiet, except for the faint tick of the clock above the door. We stood there, Me holding her past, her holding back from mine. When she finally stepped closer, she didn't touch me. She just placed her hand over the photo, pressing it down against the counter. Her fingers lingered, brushing mine by accident, or maybe on purpose. "Don't ask me for more than I can give," she said softly. And for the first time, I understood she wasn't warning me off. She was warning me what it would cost her to stay. She came back 2 nights later, later than usual, after the streets had emptied of most people. The shop was warm, the smell of old paper and coffee lingering in the corners. I didn't speak at first. I just watched her move through the aisles, slow, deliberate, like she belonged here, but didn't quite want to admit it. I cleared a small space on the counter, making room for her to set down the envelope she still carried from the last visit. She didn't. Instead, she leaned against the edge, shoulders just slightly brushing mine. The contact was light enough to dismiss if anyone had seen it, heavy enough to burn if we felt it fully. We didn't talk immediately. Silence, for once, didn't feel loaded. It felt fragile, gentle, as if the world had shrunk to this quiet corner of the shop and nothing else mattered. I could see the exhaustion in her eyes, not just from work or life, but from carrying years of regrets she never let anyone touch. I didn't try to fix it. I just let myself be there, close enough that she could feel me without needing words. She finally spoke, voice low, almost a whisper. "I can't keep pretending I know what's safe." "You don't have to," I said. Her fingers brushed mine this time. Just a fleeting touch, accidental maybe, but I felt the tremor run up her arm. She looked down at it, then back at me, a slow exhale escaping her lips. No one had ever waited for her like this. Not for the silence, not for the hesitation, not for the mess of her history. "I'm tired," she said finally. "Of running, of walls, of trying not to feel." I nodded. "Me too." The storm of all the unspoken moments, all the near confessions, all the longing and fear seemed to settle between us. We didn't speak of love. We didn't make promises. But in the rhythm of our breaths, the near touch of our hands, the way she leaned slightly into the counter while I stayed just close enough to meet her gaze, something undeniable had formed. Minutes stretched. I reached slowly, placing my hand over hers. She didn't pull away. Just let it rest there, palm to palm, fingers brushing. For the first time, she laughed quietly, soft, almost incredulous, like she couldn't believe the simplicity of it. Maybe this is enough," she murmured. I didn't argue. I didn't need to. We stayed like that, close but careful, for as long as the quiet allowed. The world outside the windows could crash, the rain could pour, but in that moment, nothing else existed but the shared space between us, the touch of fingers, the understanding that whatever came next would be ours to navigate together. And when she finally straightened, pulled back just slightly, I realized we had crossed an invisible line without saying a word. A collapse into something inevitable. Nothing was perfect. Nothing was finished. But somehow, that fleeting hand touch, that gentle pause in the storm of our lives, felt like the first step toward being whole, together, yet entirely ourselves. It's months later now. The shop smells of old books and fresh coffee, as it always has, but something's different. She's here more often, not just in bursts of need or rainstorms, but because she wants to be. And I noticed the difference in myself too. I used to think longing meant pain. That closeness was a risk you had to calculate. Now I know it can mean quiet understanding. That the weight of history, our mistakes, our regrets, doesn't have to crush you if you let someone sit beside you while you carry it. She still moves with that composed grace, but I see the little things. The way her shoulders relax when she laughs at something I say, the faint smudge of ink on her fingers from scribbling notes, the way she steals glances at me when she thinks I'm not looking. The walls she built are still there, but they lean slightly outward, just enough for me to be near. I've changed too. I've learned to be patient, to watch, to listen without rushing toward answers. I've learned to let her past, and my own insecurities, breathe without trying to fix everything at once. I've learned that love isn't always a confession or a dramatic gesture. It's the quiet presence, the small touch, the shared silence that feels like home. Sometimes I catch myself smiling at the little ordinary moments, handing her a coffee, brushing dust from a shelf, watching her fingers linger on the corner of a book. The spark that first drew me to her hasn't dimmed. It's grown steadier, warmer, like a lamp left on for the sake of its own light. She once told me that some things aren't meant to be fixed. I don't think she meant us, though. Not really. She was right about one thing. Some things can't be forced. But some things, if they're real, find a way to exist quietly, persistently, until the timing feels right. We've found our rhythm now. Not perfect, not finished, but enough. Enough to stay, enough to hold the small spaces between words and gestures, enough to let the world carry on outside while we sit together, knowing that even silence can mean something profound. And I suppose that's what love is: unexpected, slow-burning, imperfect, and entirely human. She looks at me from across the counter and smiles, that same small, deliberate smile I've memorized. I raise my hand slightly, she lifts hers, and for a moment, fingers almost touch. And that's enough. Enough to know we've learned something neither of us could have before. Enough to know we'll keep learning, together, in this quiet, messy, beautiful way. And if you've ever felt a spark that refuses to leave, even in silence, maybe you know exactly what I mean.